We have this wonderful example of Abraham as we think about what it means for us to have faith. And so the author writes to the Christians who are living in Rome, who are Hebrews by origin. And he uses the example of Abraham to help them understand what their faith means, and it is a lesson for us as well. We first of all see that the Lord takes Abraham outside and shows him the stars of the sky and tells him that if you can count them, that is how many your descendants will be. They will be as numerous as the sand on the seashore. And so faith is about, first of all, thinking much bigger about our lives, not allowing our lives to in some way shrink around things that maybe we achieve or possess in life, but that the Lord always calls us to more, to see that our lives really are much more expansive than we give ourselves credit for or that others expect of us. And I think as we get older and we look back on the trajectory of our lives, we begin to see how true that is, that maybe our original plans of life did not go as we had thought, and yet there were so many other riches, so many other blessings that came in our life that we didn't count on. That's the kind of faith we're always asked to have about the future. I think I mentioned some weeks ago about the woman who celebrated her 100th birthday, and she was asked by her granddaughter, what is it that you would say as the greatest accomplishment in your life? And she simply said, I don't think I can say that because I'm not done yet. That's the kind of big thinking that the Lord calls us to in having faith. The second thing is that we have this image of Abraham being on a journey. He is one who takes one step at a time. And faith also is that ability to take the next step, to, especially when we're beaten down or we fall down, to get up and continue the journey. It's that wonderful phrase that we hear in that second reading, that faith is the realization of the things we hope for and the evidence of things we cannot see. Just by continuing, taking the next step, that is an act of faith, especially when the road ahead seems so very difficult for us, the challenge is too great, or there are headwinds that thwart us. Just the ability to take that next step is an act of faith. And finally, we see that faith comes in God's surprises in life. We see that in the gospel, where in fact the master comes home and finds that those who were waiting on him did a good job, and so he becomes the waiter himself. He puts on the apron, has them sit down, and he waits on table. That, I think, is important as well to realize that there are so many ways in which the Lord has come into our lives that we not only did not plan on or expect, but are surprised about. The Eucharist is an opportunity to regain that kind of faith. For it is an opportunity for us to think big about our lives. For the Eucharist that we receive here at the table is just a foretaste of the banquet in heaven. There's a connection there. That's all that God has in store for us. And secondly, communion so often, especially for those who are dying, has been called the vademecum. That is, that which you take along the journey, food for the journey. And so when we come here and receive the Eucharist, we have the kind of faith that allows us, because of the Eucharist, to take the next step. And finally, the Eucharist does open us to surprises. For the Lord gives of himself to be consumed. He's willing to be broken for us. Here, the Lord of all the heavens, the one who created all things, comes into our lives and allows himself to be broken for us and calls us to be broken for others. That too is a surprise in our life. So today, as we think about our faith, let's make sure that we understand that we're called to have the same kind of faith that the readings today call us to. A faith that thinks big about our lives. a faith that helps us take the next step in the journey that we're on, but also a faith that's always open to the surprises of God, surprises that in fact give us a sense of wonder and awe about our lives. Let us have the faith, the kind of faith that is the realization of the things we hope for and the evidence of the things we do not see.